Here in Queensland, we have legal protections for 23 human rights. Let's explore how public entities can properly consider human rights when they deliver services to people in Queensland.
These are the rights in Queensland that are now protected in law. So that's a really important statement for the Parliament to make. And it should signify an improvement in decision making and improved service delivery.
The decision and actions you take when working for a public entity can fulfil or restrict human rights. To be sure that you act compatibly, make sure you properly consider human rights even when following a policy or procedure. It is important to turn your mind to the individual circumstances of those involved.
So public entities in many ways do the heavy lifting in the Human Rights Act. So the Act creates two obligations on them. First of all, for them to give proper consideration to human rights when making a decision, and secondly, to act compatibly with human rights when they're doing their work. So they're the two obligations, and it really just requires them to turn their mind to human rights, to identify what rights might be engaged by particular decisions that they're making. If you're evicting someone from a house, then quite clearly you could be engaging the right to the protection of families and children. That's just one example in this context.
The Human Rights Act guides how we consider and balance human rights.
Well, the biggest benefit is really in Section 13 of the Act, which sets out that decision-making tool. It's often called the proportionality test, and it just requires the public entity to consider what is the purpose of the limitation that they're imposing on human rights, and is it reasonable, is it necessary, and is it proportionate or balanced? So I really see that as the benefit. It's introducing an empathetic decision-making tool.
Giving proper consideration to human rights can be complex. We've devised a process to help with 4 simple steps. Understand the purpose of your service. Identify the human rights engaged by your decision. Test the human rights compatibility of your decision. And finally, justify your decision. Let's look at each step in more detail. The first step is being clear about your purpose. Think about what you're ultimately trying to achieve in making this decision. The second step is to identify the human rights engaged by your proposed decision. Decisions can affect lots of people, not just those in front of you. Think about the nature of the human rights you've identified and the extent to which they'll be restricted. Try imagining human rights on a sliding scale from low to high. You will need to have a clear decision or action in mind before moving on to step 3. Step 3 involves testing the compatibility of your decision. Ask yourself, is it lawful? Consider any laws and regulations. Is there a purpose? What is the purpose of my decision? Is it rational? Will this decision actually achieve my desired outcome? Is it necessary? Are there less restrictive ways to achieve my purpose? Is it fair and balanced? Is this decision fair? Will the benefits outweigh any harm or limitation caused? If you answered no to any of these questions, you may not be acting compatibly with human rights, and you may need to reconsider your decision. Step 4 involves justifying your decision. After making your decision, document the expected outcome for each person involved. Document the factors which informed your decision, those for and against. These will include human rights consideration, but also things like available resources, other legislation, best practice, or any delegations. This means you're being transparent and shows you understand the impact of your decision.
So we know that human rights are not absolute. They can be limited in a way that is reasonable and can be justified in a democratic society.
As we embed these practices, we continue to build a human rights culture across our sector.
My key takeaway message would be you have a very difficult job. The Act can help you do your job. And what I hope is that instead of seeing clients as problems to be solved, you see clients as autonomous bearers of human rights.